Chapter 7. After driving into East Point, Knox turned from the freeway and into the main streets of the area. They were headed southwards into Clara's territory. She controlled everything south and east of the highway, and Jimmy operated up in the north. Up until the other night, they had each stayed within their boundaries, but now tensions between the two sectors of the company would be at a new high. Steele half expected Benedict Vandermont, the board member in charge of all of East Point, to step in and resolve the problem, but the board members were not known for such things. They were more than happy to let their associates, like Jimmy and Clara, to fight it out until one became the victor. If either died, there was no end of eager replacements. Benedict only cared that business continued to operate as usual. Turning off the road, Knox drove into the drive-thru of a fast food restaurant and stopped at the ordering booth. Neither of them really enjoyed takeout meals, but this place was fairly good, and their burgers were well made with decent quality meat and salad. Because of the quality of the burgers, they had to wait a little while, but the food came soon enough, and after paying they continued on their way. The smell of the meal and the taste of the special sauce sent Steele's mind swirling back to the first times he had ever eaten from this fast food restaurant. Feelings of joy and excitement returned to him, excitement to be spending time with his father. Because of his father's shift work, Steele really got to spend time with his dad. He remembered the day they had come here like it was yesterday. His sister and mother had come as well. He remembered the smiles on their faces and the mixture of delight and weariness he had felt. He'd only been young then, and had spent the day at the museum in Central. The memory faded away, but his distant smile remained on his face. "What's that smile for?" Knox asked curiously, interrupting Steele's nostalgic moment, and causing his smile to slip away. Nothing. Steele dismissed the query, and Knox gave him a perplexed expression. "Right. Well, are you really sure you want to speak with Clara?" Knox asked again, eating while he drove. Fortunately, the roads were very busy, and most of the time they were virtually stationary. Packed in with the rest of the cars, buses and trucks. "Yes," Steele replied simply, swallowing his mouthful before replying. "I get it," Knox smiled. "You're planning on playing both Jimmy and Clara to maximize profits, right?" "Something like that, sure," Steele shrugged. "Sounds dangerous," Knox remarked, giving his friend a serious glance. "Perhaps," agreed Steele. "But to survive you need money in this city, and the quickest ways of making money are usually the most dangerous or highest risk." "I suppose," nodded Knox. "But I could steal $1 million painting from the mansions of one of my lady friends, and that's not very high risk." "Really?" Steele frowned. "You get caught and your reputation is destroyed. Even if you succeed and are not eventually caught, that lady and all her friends would know the truth. So by stealing that painting, you're risking a great deal." "Well, when you put it like that, I guess it would be," Knox agreed thoughtfully. "That's probably the reason I haven't done it." Knox laughed at that, bringing a smile to Steele's face as he eyed Knox closely. His friend had put back on his carefree mask, which made some sense considering they were nearing the building where Clara operated. Steele had noticed that Knox had been wearing his persona for the most of the time they'd been talking together since he arrived in Eden. The fact saddened him, for there had been a time when the trust between them had been strong. Now, not so much. That was to be expected, though. 10 years was a long time, and people change. It'd be a while still before the bond of friendship between them was as it once had been, and Steele hoped that it would reach those heights once more. Since arriving, though, it seemed like the gap between he and his friend had widened, a fact that had been displayed with Knox lying about the night he'd gone to help the university students in the clubs to talk to women, with the aim of getting laid. Steele did not doubt that Knox might actually do some of those things for work, but that particular night he had clearly lied. They were both adults, though. Knox was entitled to do as he wished and say as little as he wanted. That did not bother Steele. The growing rift in his friendship with Knox did concern him, though. Of course, he'd felt like saying something ever since Knox picked him up from the police station this morning. He really wanted to. But he held his tongue, for reasons that he did not really understand, and he let the tension between them linger. He should have said something. Steele knew that. His mind was preoccupied, though. This coming meeting with Clara would prove crucial to his plans. He could always set those records straight with Knox at a later time. The Trading Co. building came into view around the next corner, its tall head reaching high above the rest of the towers around it and catching the light of the sun. The reflective glass of the windows shimmered in the light, and Steele leaned forward in his seat to look at the pinnacle of the building. "You sure about this?" Knox asked again, slowing the car as they came towards the entry drive that curled into a semicircle in front of the main entrance. "I am," Steele said simply, and Knox let out a deep breath as he drove towards the front entrance. Pulling to a stop before the short steps to the main doors, a man in a suit, wearing sunglasses, came over. It seemed that the man was valet, but his expression suggested he was also watching the doors for Clara. "We're here to see Clara," Knox said, winding down the window to speak to the man. "I'm Templeton Knox, and this is Reinhardt Steele." The suited man said nothing as he stepped away from the car and took out his phone to make a call. After a few seconds of talking on the phone, he ended the call and turned back to Knox. "Come on," the valet said seriously, motioning for them to get out. "Head on up to the top floor. I'll park your car." "Thanks," Knox said as he and Steele got out, leaving the key in the ignition. "Do take good care of her." The valet said nothing, looking with some confusion back to the old and fairly uncared-for vehicle as Knox walked up to the main doors. Steele walked beside his friend, and together they wandered through the reception hall. The Tradeco Tower was home to many businesses and offices, most of which focusing on imports and exports, and all of which were owned by Clara and the company to some extent. Everyone was well aware of this, but on paper everything looked legitimate, so the police could do very little so long as the businesses paid their taxes and kept their operations legal. The elevators across from the entrance opened as they approached, and Steele felt his gut go tight as Farron walked from the lift to greet them. She wore the clothes of a professional, with a pencil skirt, high heels, a white blouse and a dark jacket. Her strawberry blonde hair was in a tail tied behind her head and draped over one shoulder, and her blue eyes sparkled in the light coming through the main doors. In one hand was an electronic tablet that made her look part of an executive of one of the businesses in the tower. He suddenly regretted not returning to Knox's flat and having a shower to freshen up before coming here. "Farron," Knox smiled wide in greeting. "You're looking well. You remember Steele, don't you?" "Welcome, Knox," Farron said politely before turning to Steele and seeming to have her voice becoming stuck in her throat. "Yes, I remember. It's been a long time." Farron extended a hand to greet Steele, which he accepted with a slight smile. The touch of her skin brought flashes of happiness and friendship to his mind, of a young girl who showed him interest and kindness in a classroom of derision and avoidance. The flashes of memory were brief, just like their blossoming friendship had been. Farron had left Eden with her sister all too soon, leaving him with wistful thoughts to give him strength during those classes. "How's your sister?" Steele asked politely, focusing on the present. "She's doing well," Farron replied hesitantly, turning and leading the way towards the elevators. "She's living in Talmon, on the mainland." The scent of Farron's hair shampoo filled his senses, bringing even more memories back to him, for those strawberry blonde locks had smelt the same in high school. "When did you return to Eden?" asked Farron as she pressed the button to call the lift. "A few days ago," he replied, noticing Knox watching the conversation very closely, a slight smile on his face. "What about you? I didn't think you'd ever return after what happened." "I thought the same of you," Farron replied, the hints of annoyance in her voice catching Steele by surprise. "It was about 5 years ago I came back." The lift arrived and they entered before Farron pressed a button for the top floor. "And joined Clara's group straight away?" Steele narrowed his eyes slightly, bringing a frown to Farron's brow. "Not as quickly as you joined up with Jimmy Pierce," she replied curtly. "I haven't joined Jimmy's crew," Steele said seriously, starting to feel a little bit annoyed. "You need cash if you want to survive in Eden." "I'm well aware of that," Farron replied. "Not all things are about money, though. Who you side with is also important." "Who have you sided with?" Steele asked, his eyes narrowing, grabbing Farron's attention. She did not reply, but he could see the flicker of unease come to her blue eyes before she looked away. The mood in the lift suddenly became very awkward, and thankfully the doors opened with a loud chime. Farron walked swiftly from the compartment and led the way along the short corridor. "Smooth," Knox remarked quietly to Steele as he followed. Shooting his friend a slight glare, Steele followed, noticing a thick carpet that ran along the corridor. Flowers in expensive vases sitting on thin hall benches, and the well-known artworks that hung on the walls that were likely originals. Despite the lavish surroundings, his eyes were more interested in Farron, walking in front of them, the back of her delicate neck and the sway of her hips. At the end of the hall there was a desk beside a closed door, and without knocking, Farron pushed her way through into a large office with tall windows that let in the daylight and led out into a small terrace. There was more artwork and expensive items about the office, along with several thugs wearing professional suits with grim expressions. But Steele's attention was drawn to the single desk of dark wood that stood opposite the entrance, and when Clara was sitting, her eyes hard as she glared at him. The deep scar on the woman's cheek, in the shape of a cross, twitched uncontrollably as she stood up and moved to the front of her desk to greet them. Clara also wore professional clothes similar to Farron, but hers were of richer material and tailored. The designer clothes did little to add to her looks, though. Clara was 7 years older, and of a heavier build than Farron, making Steele think she should have opted for suit pants instead of a skirt, like she had worn the previous night during the drug deal. This was not to say Clara was unattractive or overweight. Simply she had greater curves, and if it had not been for the nasty scar on her face, Steele would have thought Clara was indeed a good-looking woman. "Good morning, Miss Causewell," Knox greeted politely as Clara moved in front of the desk. Steele and Knox stopped a few paces away, and Farron stepped off to the side with the rest of the entourage. "You've got some balls coming here, Reinhardt Steele." Clara frowned darkly, ignoring Knox's greeting. "What do you want? Actually, I'm surprised you made it out of lockup at all. You must have some friends in the police force." "No," Steele replied simply. "I just called them on their bluff. You managed to dump all the evidence last night, but I expected more of your crew to be charged." Steele looked directly at Farron as he finished his sentence, noticing her jaw tense slightly as she looked towards the window and purposefully away from his gaze. "Those morons can't hold me or my people," Clara scoffed, her dark expression unchanged. "But you haven't answered my question. Give me one good reason why I shouldn't shoot you in the head." As she spoke, Clara took out a pistol from her jacket and casually held it in front of her to accentuate her threat. "Come on, Clara," Knox tried to say, to diffuse the tension in the room. "Steele's an old friend. We grew up together, even lived a few doors down from each other in their horseshoe apartment. He's—" "Not now, Templeton," Clara snapped angrily, cutting him off. "It's all right, Knox," Steele added calmly. "I have several reasons why killing me would be pointless. Firstly, you wrongfully think I'm part of Jimmy's crew." "Do I?" scoffed Clara. "I was merely looking for some quick cash the other night, and Jimmy gave me the opportunity," Steele explained simply. "But if you're not part of Jimmy's crew," Clara said gravely, raising a handgun towards Steele, "then you're the one who called the cops on us." "Clara!" Knox exclaimed. "A reasonable conclusion," Steele shrugged. "But why would I come here then?" "That's what I asked you in the first place," replied the company associate, the hand holding her pistol towards Steele, unmoving. "I still want to make some quick cash," Steele replied honestly, forcing his gaze past the loaded gun into Clara's eyes. "You're trying to play both me and Jimmy, aren't you?" Clara said flatly, her scarred cheek twitching slightly. "No, I'm trying to make a living," Steele said seriously. "Whether I get paid by you or Jimmy, it doesn't bother me." "You have some balls," Clara scoffed, her weapon hand lowering. "But in this town, you either work for me or Jimmy. You know we're both working for Benedict and the company, but that greedy bastard wants to be the only associate in East Point. I make more money, but he has an easier job. His greed outweighs his brains. One associate can't do all the work in East Point, and Benedict doesn't want to get his hands dirty, so there'll always be two associates. Even if Jimmy kills me, Benedict will put another in my spot. So, you either work for me or Jimmy. It's as simple as that, and it seems you've already made your choice." "I'm not part of Jimmy's crew," Steele said firmly, "and I don't intend to sign an exclusivity agreement." "Then why are we talking?" Clara asked seriously, her scar twitching. "For clarification," Steele replied, "and understanding." Clara narrowed her eyes at his, her fingers caressing the trigger of her pistol. "And because I wanted to see Farron again," Steele continued, glancing into the woman nearby and causing her eyes to widen in surprise. "Clara, I already know you send work Knox's way, and I don't want you to stop because of me. I am not part of Jimmy's crew, but if he offers me work, just as if you offer me work, I will take it provided you pay me appropriately. So, do we have an understanding?" The scar on Clara's face twitched again, and she put her handgun away, her eyes still narrowed. "All right," she said slowly, her suspicion still obvious. "You want to play both sides. That's your business. But if you double-cross me to Jimmy or rat me to the police, I'll string you up by your own intestines. We're done here. Farron, see them out." No more was said, and Steele turned away and walked with Farron and Knox back to the doors. "I want to have a word with you later, Knox," Clara called after him. "Sure," Knox said over his shoulder. "Let me know a time." One of Clara's other subordinates closed the doors behind them, and Farron led the way to the lift. Silence had fallen over the three of them, and Steele noticed that both Knox and Farron sending strange glances in his direction as they waited for the lift and on the way back to the lobby. "Here we are," said Farron as they stepped back into the entrance hall. "Have a good day." "Wait," Steele said before she could slip back into the elevator. "Can I call you sometime, Farron?" She stopped and turned back to him, a puzzled look on her face. The elevator doors closed and she continued to hesitate, and Steele noticed that Knox had continued walking towards the exit. "Steele," Farron said, biting her lower lip awkwardly. "It's been well over 10 years since we last spoke. A lot has changed." "I know," he agreed. "It's good to see a friendly face, though, and real friends are hard to come by in this city." A slight smile flickered to Farron's lips, and she took a business card from her pocket and handed it to him. "Here, my number," she said as he looked at the surprisingly professional business card. "Perhaps it would be nice to catch up over a coffee sometime." "Cool," said Steele, slipping the card into his pocket and turning away. "I'll see you around. Don't get yourself killed." "You too," she replied as he walked away without looking back. Knox was waiting for him at the entrance, and together they walked down the steps to Knox's car that the valet was pulling up in. "So," said Knox, a frown on his face as they drove away from the Trading Co. building. "What exactly was the point of coming here?" "To get Farron's number, obviously," Steele smiled to his friends, causing Knox to genuinely laugh. "Seriously, though," Knox continued, "what was all the talk about clarification and understanding with Clara? I think I missed something." "I told you before, I'm here to make some money," Steele said after taking a deep breath. "And working for both Clara and Jimmy will get me money quickly." "Why not just work for one of them? Might be safer that way," Knox offered, his brow creased. "The thing is, Jimmy is greedy and wants Clara's business," Steele explained. "So a concern for safety is rather pointless. Clara knows Jimmy is pressing to take her out, and going directly against him would spark a full war between them. She also does not have the strength to overtly face him. So instead, she will look to use assets outside the company and her crew." "You, in other words," Knox said, coming to the understanding. "Exactly. Now that I've made it clear that I have no loyalty to Jimmy," Steele explained, "she can also see that I'm not concerned with getting myself killed. So, I'd be willing to double-cross both her and Jimmy for the right amount. Now, that is detrimental to her as much as Jimmy, but she thinks she is aware of the danger so she can see it coming and be ready for it, whereas Jimmy doesn't know, now that I've spoken with Clara. So she thinks she has an advantage if Jimmy makes the move." "Damn," Knox said, scratching his head. "The way your brain works makes my brain hurt. A hell of a risk, though." "Come on, Knox," Steele said. "I know you're not as dumb as you pretend to be around other people. Things might have changed in 10 years, but I still think I know you pretty well." Knox smirked. "Thanks. You know I still practice the sign language you taught me." "Really?" Steele was surprised. "Doesn't that bring back memories of your drunken father hitting you and your mother?" "Yeah," Knox admitted, "but in all honesty, sitting outside at old flats in the Horseshoe apartment doing homework helped me keep my mind off things. And I remember those times fondly." "Fondly?" Steele wondered with some surprise. "The most I remember of that place was my father never being home and the beatings your dad gave you." "I suppose," Knox nodded, his mind in distant memories as well. "I can still smell my father's blood and piss when we killed him, you know." "Accidentally killed in self-defense," Steele corrected. "Yeah," said Knox slowly. "I never really thanked your father for helping us when that happened." "He knew," Steele replied. "I still think you should have come and practiced martial arts with me instead of being in that flat. It might have changed the way things went down that afternoon." "No, that was your escape from all the stuff from school," Knox said in a similar tone. "Besides, that never really interested me much. You might have helped on occasion, though, Steele said dryly, instead of leaving all the fighting to me at school. You know, I was talking with Frankie on the way to the deal the other night. He still remembers when I broke his arm. I remember that. Knox laughed. Frankie always strutted about schoolyard like he owned the place, just because his family were company men. Why was he picking on me again? He had a crush on Susie, Steele remembered, a smile coming to his face, but she liked you. That's right. Knox laughed aloud. And I rubbed it in Frankie's face. Good times. I think Susie's one of Jimmy's whores now. I guess Frankie got to have her in the end then, Steele remarked, bringing a frown to Knox's face. Silence came between them, and by then they were nearing Knox's apartment. Steele was just thinking how nice it might be to have a shower and then maybe a nap, but his vibrating phone drew his attention. It was the one Jimmy had given him, and indeed it was Jimmy that was sending him a message. A frown came to Steele's face as he read the message silently. Come to the club. Now. Steele clenched his teeth, his gut turning uncomfortably. Something had changed, and by the tone of Jimmy's message, it did not feel like it would bode well for him.